Hi everybody, Sifu Ed here, and the topic of the conversation today is going to be a non-kid friendly topic. So I would suggest if the munchkins are going to look at this, then I'd suggest that they not look at this, because the name of the topic is Jeet Kune bullshit? And the reason that I'm doing this is because I watched a video a couple of days ago by a gentleman named Matt Thornton, who has a gym called Straight Blast Gym up in Portland. And it was a really good video. He was very candid, very open, honest about his assessment of what was occurring in the Jeet Kune world of instruction and why he departed from that. And I wanted to pick that up a little bit because I think it's a relevant topic. A little bit about my background. I started training in 1986. Well, I had been training prior to that when I'm from Kentucky. And I did Shotokan, Kung Fu, box, wrestled, and then moved to California. And when I moved to California, it was 1986, and I began at the world famous Inosanto Academy with Guru Dan Inosanto, and trained with a number of his instructors up through the late 90s, on again, off again. And it was fantastic training, really fantastic training. At that point, I was no longer geographically able to make it to the academy. And so I met randomly Sifu Fran Joseph, who was married to Sifu Jerry Poteet, and asked her if he was accepting students. And I started training with him privately from that point in the late 90s until his death in 2012. Along the way, I started fighting. I was fighting in Thai boxing under crew sort of Puktam Juntra, the Muay Thai Academy in North Hollywood, and so I had a pretty good grasp on stuff that works. And I just want to address the issue of training methodologies, and I don't want to give people the impression that Jeet Kune doesn't work, because if we examine the concept, if we examine the principle as I understand it that Bruce Lee laid out, and there are different interpretations of this. I think what we have to remember is that anyone who has ever participated in a martial arts school, if there's a main guy who's teaching, there's going to be students under them, and they're all going to have their individual takeaways from what that teacher is trying to impart. So there's going to be a different interpretation of material. That's part of it. So I truly believe that's what's occurred with what Bruce Lee was trying to convey to his students. And what Sifu Jerry taught me was the most important element is simplicity. Simplicity, economy, emotion, direct, straight to the point. Tommy Carruthers posted something last week that said, Jeet Kune is meant to be straight to the point. None of this dancing around shite, I think is how he phrased it. And that correlates with what Mr. Thornton was talking about. Just get to the point, get it done. Does it work? But then we also have to look at some of the other principles that Sijo Lee was trying to impart, which is, why are you doing it? It's meant, according to him, as a vehicle for awakening, for dispelling ignorance and understanding the truth, awakening, enlightenment. So there's a lot in between those worlds. So first, on a practical level, does it work? So that was a primary concern, I believe, of his, and that's what was conveyed to me by both Guru Inosanto and Sifu Jerry. So does it work? If you look at the training methodology, there's some stuff that's probably not efficient, but that's generally labeled as what's referred to as self-perfection, where we're building reflexive responses, actions, movements, so that we can respond more efficiently, ultimately. And then that usually kind of comes back to the trapping. So I gained a great appreciation for the sensitivity drills and the awareness. It's kind of like stand-up jujitsu from Sifu Jerry, and I think it works. I think it translates when you're throwing elbows and knees and you're in that close range to where you need to feel somebody move and you adapt and you adjust to it. But again, you got to get back to how does it work when you actually fight, when the person's being non-compliant. You ask any law enforcement official who's dealing with some guy who's not compliant, who they're trying to restrain, and it's a nightmare. I used to bounce when I was in Kentucky. And if you're trying to control somebody who's half out of their mind and you're expected to throw some kind of move on them, some fancy 1, 2, 3, whoosh, pop, boom, and then they're down. That ain't how it is. It just doesn't work that way. So that's one of the reasons that I think jiu-jitsu is so valid and so appropriate. And from what I understand, I was talking to an officer who's one of our students, said that LA County has now said that the carotid choke is out of line for law enforcement officials. And I don't know, he's CMEPD, but I don't know if that's blanketed across LASD and LAPD. But can you imagine? I understand that because people who don't have sufficient training, they lay a choke on somebody, they keep hanging on to them, and the person dies. I get that. That's unacceptable. But when you take that out of the repertoire of movements where you can potentially control somebody, that takes out a big weapon. So anyway, I'm kind of losing track of what I'm attempting to convey here. But you get the point. It all comes down to what ultimately works. Does it work when you plug it in? So let me leave you with this. A number of years ago, I ran a class, and it was we wanted to go back to basics, and it was full contact all the time for 6 months. And I chose a group of students to do this, and it was with the forewarning that you're going to get beat up, you're going to get banged up when you go through this, and it's just part of it. You choose, do you want to do it? And so I had probably about 15 people who started, and then ultimately ended up with about 7 who finished. And when we initiated that course, there was a gentleman who, we used to have a gym called Combative Arts Academy down in LA. And one of the guys had been training in an Indonesian style. And it has to do with a lot of forms practice. And you memorize these forms, you go through them over and over and over again, and a lot of simulated scenarios where somebody throws a punch and you do this or that to them. And I just asked him, hey, do you want to come do this? Because I've never seen you do any sparring. I've never seen you plug this in. Maybe you want to give it a try, see if it works. He goes, oh, I don't know, man, because this stuff is all designed to kill you. And I went, well, that's cool, dude, but maybe you could just throw some headgear on and some MMA gloves and give it a shot and see how it goes. So he'd been training for 3 years, and I'm not, well, again, it's training methodology. I don't want to knock the art without having trained in it myself, but if the training methodology is not effective. So he came into the class, and I had a guy who'd been training for 3 months, total of 3 months. And I said, go. And the fellow who'd been training for 3 years just got the shit kicked out of him. I mean, there's no other way to say it. He just didn't even know how to deal with a punch, man. And this other guy wasn't that good. Just wham, wham came in, and he just didn't even know how to deal with it. So that's bullshit. If you're training for 3 years and you just can't even figure out how to deal with a punch, yeah. If you're trapping and you throw 4, 5, 6 moves before you hit somebody, that's bullshit, because it doesn't work. Now, I know a lot of people get down sometimes on a certain perspective, particularly the self-perfection drills that come out of Guru and Asanto's line. But at the same time, has he produced people who know how to fight? Yeah, he absolutely has. I tell you, go in the ring with Eric Paulson, get in with Ron Balicki, Chad Stahelski, any of those guys, and Francis Saint-Chenard. They can throw down. So I don't think we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. And it's not an issue of concepts versus original JKD. What is the ultimate underlying truth? I think that's ultimately what Bruce was trying to convey. What's the truth? And it's different for each individual. but your training methodology has to reflect that. And if your truth is, does this work when I really need it? There's some dings and dents that you've got to get. That's just how it is to go through it. Doesn't mean that you can't train for self-improvement, for exercise, for that process of self-illumination. But along the way, adversity is part of that. And in any martial art, where the intent is to protect you, you got to be able to actually do the deal when it comes down to it. So that's my 2 cents. Hope it's useful in some way to somebody. So you guys have a great day. Talk to you soon.